Do you recognize this document? I hope so, because it is our Constitution. Our Constitution defines a framework for our country's government. Our Constitution establishes laws to give us a sense of direction and order for our country. And so, to better understand our Constitution, we're going to take a look at some of the history behind it. So let's take a quick look at the opening preamble of our Constitution, and we can look at various phrases. We the people is declaring unity, and of the United States was referring to how the individual states were coming together to be united. In order to form a more perfect union, referred to something called the Articles of Confederation and how they were very weak. Establishing justice refers to how there was a lack of justice at the time, and so they were trying to bring everything together. Ensure domestic tranquility. That meant that the aim was to achieve a state of peace. The next part, provide for the common defense, meant that the ability to defend the rights and lives of United States citizens. Promote the general welfare was added to mean, well, for the common good. Secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity refers to how the patriots were fighting for liberty and freedom from British rule in the American War for Independence. Liberty was seen as a way to bring happiness, which promoted prosperity or wealth, and then welfare or well-being. Do ordain and establish means we're going to make this law. And then finally, that Constitution for the United States, again, providing this framework of laws. Now, as readers, you may have noticed that there were quite a few words in that piece of text that had some pretty deep meaning. And maybe you were unsure what some of those words meant. And so, of course, one of our goals as readers is to determine the meaning of academic and domain-specific words and phrases in a text. We're going to work to use, of course, various strategies to determine the meaning of words, as well as using resources that will help us determine the meaning of unknown words. And a great piece of text to work with, of course, is our Constitution, but also some articles that help us better understand. So we're going to read about our Constitution and practice some reading strategies that will help us build and enhance our vocabulary. Let's start by taking a look at the idea of a word gap. When you're reading and an author uses a word or phrase that you don't know, you really should stop and ask yourself, do I know this word from someplace else? Does this seem like technical talk that's really more for experts about this topic? Or can I find clues in the sentence to help me understand the word? We're going to take a look at how we can help close some of these word gaps that we might have as readers. Let's see if we can work on filling them in. I'm going to have us start by reading an article that is set up with a timeline. Now, a timeline is a text feature that shows events in a chronological order. In other words, in sequence. I think this text is full of word gaps or technical talk, and there are many words that I have to think about whether or not I know from someplace else. For example, in the very first part of the article, it refers to declaration and resolves, as well as articles of association. Now, what's very helpful here is that I do have some information to help me fill that word gap. But as I continue to go on, I've got things like the Revolutionary War, Articles of Confederation, I have delegates, ratify, ratify again, and then ratification. And so I think that ratify and ratification are, in fact, related words. I also see ratify here again, and then amendments. And so I want to consider all of these words because I feel these are word gaps that I probably need to work on filling to help me better understand what this piece of text is telling me. So in my reader's notebook, I noted these word gaps from A Road to a Constitution. I'm going to look more closely at delegates and ratify, ratification. So this is a tool that can help me with word gaps called a Frayer model. I'm going to note the word delegates here in the center, and then I'm going to look it up. When I looked up the definition for delegates, I found that it was a person sent or authorized to represent others. And so when I think about the characteristics of that, and the more I looked into it, I found that it really was just someone chosen or selected. Now, what's great about the idea of examples and non-examples is that I can think about perhaps some synonyms or other words that might mean the same. And for non-examples, I can think about antonyms or opposites. So for examples, I found words like representative, perhaps someone who is an agent or a spokesperson. And for non-examples, I came up with someone who tries to take over. So this helps me get a better understanding of what a delegate is. When I looked up ratify or ratification as it's related, I noted that ratify is an action or a verb. To ratify, you're doing something. And ratification is the act of doing it, or the noun. Now, the definition is to then sign or give formal consent to perhaps a treaty, a contract, or agreement, making it officially valid. And so the characteristics of ratify or ratification is to sign or agree to something, to make it stick, or could also consider that when you're ratifying or when something's ratified, it's a vote or maybe a discussion geared to approve. So examples of ratifying would be, or even synonyms would be, to sign or approve. And the opposite of that, or a non-example, would be to reject or to not approve. And so using this model, I can explore the meaning of words to help me clear up word gaps when I read. So after you've explored the Road to a Constitution article, the next article I want you to take a look at is something called the Bill of Rights. Now, the particular piece that I gave you is something that we call a primary source. And a primary source is an artifact, document, diary, manuscript, autobiography, recording, or any other source of information that was created at the time under study. In other words, it serves as an original source of information about the topic. So this piece of text is the original Bill of Rights. This particular text, I believe, is also filled with a great deal of word gaps. So you can get your highlighter ready and highlight words that you feel are going to need some closer examination. Now that you've highlighted some words in the Bill of Rights that give you some word gaps, we're going to switch gears a little bit and consider language of the discipline. Discipline being an area of study. And in this case, we're taking a look at historical documents. Examples of language of the discipline include things like jargon or words from experts in the area, or it can also include expressions from a particular time period. Language of the discipline also includes important terms and how they relate to each other. Now, in your reader's notebook, I want you to note the language of this historical discipline. So, in other words, can you note the words you located in the Bill of Rights in your reader's notebook? And here's a question for you. Did you have any words that you found which could have multiple meanings or are related words? So let's stretch this idea of word gaps into language of the discipline with a brochure. It takes the Frayer model and extends it a little bit more. In this brochure, I'd like you to pick 5 of the words that you found in the Bill of Rights to really explore and examine.